What is up, kiddos? I'm Tessie. Welcome to my channel. And today I'm very excited to take you on a tour of some of the rarest books that I own. I own many. And I first want to talk a little bit about what makes a rare book, in my opinion, because I'm not specifically talking about books with monetary value. Although some of these books do have monetary value, I'm more concerned with not just sentimental value, but historical value, and also their rarity as far as people being aware of them and knowing that they exist and just kind of being gems. But like I said, again, there will also be books that have some monetary value. So the kind of way I'm going to structure this is first we're going to talk about what I'm going to call the honorable mentions, which are books that I consider rare and special, but that are not necessarily what what the vast canon would consider a rare book. And then we're going to talk about some first editions and like special editions of books that I have. And finally, we'll talk about the signed copies. And those are kind of categories of rarity that I'm going to be discussing today. But as far as my honorable mentions, the first one that I want to introduce you to is Cleveland poetry scenes. I know that might seem odd, but as a Clevelander and someone who loves local poetry, this is a rare gem. This is I don't even think this is in print anymore. I don't even know where I got it, but it is a hideous anthology about the history of poetry in Cleveland, discussing some modern voices, modern as far as I think this is from like 2008, but also poets that are from Cleveland that you might not have even known are from Cleveland, like Hart Crane, Langston Hughes, wrote in Cleveland. So it's very, very cool, and I love it and I treasure it. And as far as Cleveland poetry goes, I also wanted to bring your attention to some chapbooks, some of these little like self-published poetry. I have an entire shelf of self-published poetry. I think that it's fantastic, especially when the poets are local. This is Eights by Michael Brownstein, who I've seen perform live at open mics and stuff. This is The Bone Orchard Conga by one of my personal inspirations and mentors, Ray McNeese. Very cool. And this is an anthology called Poem the Nukes that I have just destroyed with notes. I absolutely adore this. And it's such a rare little gem. Like how are you going to get your hands on this unless you just stumble upon it in a like local bookstore? I think it's super cool, and I consider that rare. So those are my honorable mentions. And now we can move on to some things that people might actually have heard of and see that are legitimate rare books. The first being my 1984 copy of 1984. It's not a first edition, but it is the commemorative 1984 edition. It's in terrible shape. The cover is coming off. It has like random notes on the inside from my mom, because this was my mother's copy from high school. That's why it's the 1984 edition. But I think it's super cool to have the commemorative 1984 edition of 1984. Pretty dope. I also happen to have a first edition copy of Vonnegut's Player Piano, which is missing a cover. I don't think it ever had one, but it's pretty cool to have the first edition of a book from, when is it from? I should know this. I'm sorry. Of a book from 1952, and it's still in pretty decent shape. Like it's coming apart a little bit, and it's missing a dust jacket, but pretty fucking cool to have the first edition. I also happen to have a very fancy collector's edition of Sirens of Titan. It's, bound in leather, gold plating, and also happens to be signed, which this is my prized possession. This is probably my favorite thing that I own. Not that Sirens of Titan is a particularly favorite book of mine. I do like it. But Vonnegut is one of my favorite authors. Having a signed copy of one of his books is super cool, especially considering that he passed away in 2007, I believe. So this is a very special object, and I love it so much. And continuing with our signed copy odyssey, this might be the coolest thing I own. And at least in my personal opinion, I think that this is so dope. It's a copy of The Dog Star by Donald Wyndham, who is not someone I'd ever heard of, or a book that I'd ever heard of. But this is a book also from the 50s, I believe. Let me check. Yeah, 1950 specifically. I don't know if this is a first edition or not. I don't think so. But it is an early edition, which I know because it's signed by Mr. Donald Wyndham. And I found this in a bookstore for $5. And I went up to the counter and I was like, I'm not complaining or anything, but did you know that this is signed? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. You know, we give them away cheap so people will come back. I'm like, bet. And I did some research, and it turns out that Donald Wyndham was a contemporary of Tennessee Williams. There's a quote from Tennessee Williams on the inside. And this book was kind of groundbreaking because in some ways, some subtle ways, but some pretty obvious ways from a modern perspective, this is a gay love story. And the author of this book was gay. And I think that's probably a reason that it's kind of floated under the radar and been shoved out of literary canon. It's also, honestly, it's not the greatest book in the world, but I definitely read it, and it's definitely fascinating to hear, somebody from this time talk about being a young gay man. It's very reminiscent of The Catcher in the Rye in a lot of ways. It's like gay Catcher in the Rye, is how I would describe it. It's really good, and I find it really cool to have this kind of obscure piece of history with a signature in it. How freaking dope is that? So this is also one of my favorite possessions. I have a couple more signed copies to show you. The first being my copy of Citizen by Claudia Rankine. An amazing, amazing book, by the way. If you haven't read this, especially if you're white and you haven't read this, fucking get it together. Now. You need to understand, this is a fantastic portrait of the Black experience. I happened to be able to see her speak and talk about this book, and that's when I got it signed in person, and I think it's very, very cool. Love this. My final book is a signed copy of Point Omega by Don DeLillo. I also got this signed in person, and I'm pretty sure that Mr. Don DeLillo was very confused. I don't think that anyone has ever said that their favorite Don DeLillo book is Point Omega. But mine is. White Noise is great too. My copy of Zero K, by the way, by Don DeLillo is also signed. But I don't like this book as much. I like this one. I like this weird ass little book. Very weird, but very good, very beautiful. And having it signed, I think, is super cool. So that's my haul of rare books. They're all special for different reasons and in different ways, and I love them with my whole heart. I love my whole bookshelf with my whole heart, but I just wanted to share with you some of these cool little gems that I've got lying around. And thank you so much for watching. I love you so much. Bye.